The Galactic Sovereignty Council had ruled the stars for 11,000 years. They were the oldest and most powerful beings in the known universe. 12 races sat on the council. Each one had conquered space travel when humans were still living in caves and hunting with stones. They called themselves the Elder Races, and they believed they owned everything. Their word was law. When they spoke, entire planets obeyed. When they gave orders, civilizations fell to their knees. No one had ever said no to them. No one had ever dared. The council operated from a massive space station called the Citadel of Consensus. It was so large that it blocked the light of nearby moons. Millions of beings lived and worked there and from its halls. The elder races controlled the fates of countless worlds. On a quiet day in the cosmic calendar, their long-range sensors picked up something interesting. A small signal came from a distant solar system called Sol. The signal showed that someone had just discovered faster-than-light travel. Someone new had joined the cosmic neighborhood. High Arbiter Velthicon received the report in his private chamber. He was the leader of the council, a towering creature made of living crystal. Light passed through his body and came out in colors that had no names in human languages. He had ruled the council for 300 years, and before that, he had served it for 2,000 more. He looked at the data about this new species. They called themselves humans. They lived on a small blue planet, third from their sun. They had short lives, soft bodies, and fragile forms. By galactic standards, they were children. Velthicon felt something like amusement. This happened every few centuries. Some primitive species would stumble upon faster-than-light technology, send out their first clumsy ships, and think they had become important. The council had a simple process for dealing with such species. It never failed. He called for an emergency session of the full council. The 12 elder races gathered in the great chamber. The Morthkai came, beings made of living silicon who had never lost a war. The Selenith Collective sent their representatives, a hive-mind species that thought as one across billions of bodies. The Virics attended, massive armored creatures who ate metal and breathed toxic gas. All 12 races agreed on what must be done. They would send an enforcement flotilla to Earth. 300 warships departed for the Sol system. Each ship carried enough firepower to burn continents to ash. Each ship had technology so advanced that humans could not even understand how it worked. The fleet moved through space like a storm of death. And at its head was Ambassador Kralith. Kralith was a serpentine creature, long and flexible, covered in scales that changed color with his mood. White scales meant diplomacy. Red scales meant danger. Right now, his scales were a calm, confident blue. This mission would be easy. They always were. The fleet arrived in Earth's orbit and took position around the planet. Kralith looked at the blue world below and saw the tiny satellites and space stations that humans had built. They were like toys compared to his ships. He almost felt sorry for these creatures. Almost he opened a communication channel and broadcast to every frequency that humans used. His message went to every radio, every television, every phone, every computer on the planet. He wanted everyone to hear. Species designation. Human, he began. Your world now falls under Galactic Sovereignty Council jurisdiction. You will surrender all spacecraft. You will dismantle all weapons. You will accept our appointed governors. You will provide tribute in labor and resources. Compliance is not requested. Compliance is required. You have one planetary rotation to respond. Kralith closed the channel and settled back in his command chair. His scales shifted to a satisfied green. Now came the waiting. He knew what would happen next because it always happened the same way. First, there would be panic. Humans would run through their streets screaming and crying. Their leaders would argue with each other, some wanting to fight, others wanting to surrender. Their military would make brave speeches about resistance. But when they saw the power of the council fleet, their courage would melt away. Then would come the desperate negotiations. Human diplomats would beg for mercy, for time, for better terms. They would offer anything, promise anything, just to save themselves. Kralith had seen it 100 times before. Finally, there would be submission. The humans would accept council rule because they had no choice. Their world would become another tributary state. Their people another source of labor and resources for the elder races in a generation. They would forget they had ever been free. Kraith waited for hours past. Then, Earth responded. The message came on every frequency, in every human language. It was signed by every nation on the planet. Presidents and prime ministers, kings and queens, democracies and dictatorships, bitter enemies who had fought each other for centuries. All of them had signed the same message. For the first time in human history, the entire species spoke with one voice. The message was short. It contained only a single word. No. Kralith stared at the transmission. His scales flickered through colors so fast that they became a muddy gray. He read the message again, certain he had made a mistake. But there was no mistake. No, not please spare us. Not let us negotiate. Not we need more time. Just no. In 11,000 years of council rule. No species had ever simply refused. Kralith opened a channel to the Citadel of Consensus. High Arbiter Velthicon needed to see this. The other council members needed to understand what was happening. On the view screen, Earth continued to spin, blue and green and beautiful. Its people went about their lives, looking up at the alien ships in their sky. They did not run. They did not panic. They did not beg. They waited. Something cold moved through Kralith's body. It was an emotion he had not felt in centuries. Something that his species had almost forgotten. It was uncertainty. He looked at the small blue planet and wondered, for the first time, if the Council had made a terrible mistake in the silence of space, surrounded by 300 of the most powerful warships ever built. Ambassador Kralith felt something he could not explain. He felt like he was being watched. The Council's response was swift and angry. High Arbiter Velthicon watched the human transmission from his chamber aboard the Citadel of Consensus. His crystal body pulsed with dark colors that meant fury. No species had ever refused them. No species had ever been so foolish. He sent new orders to Ambassador Kralith and the enforcement flotilla. The orders were simple and brutal. Destroy one major human city. Kill millions. Show these primitive creatures what happened to those who defied the Council. It was the standard response. It had worked on hundreds of worlds before. Fear was the greatest teacher. The Council was about to give humanity a lesson it would never forget. Fleet. Commander Drossix received the orders aboard his flagship. He was a Varix, a massive creature encased in natural armor with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like dying stars. He had burned cities on 20 different worlds. This would be no different. He studied the human planet and selected a target. A coastal city with 8 million people. Not their largest city, not their capital. Just a demonstration, a warning. After today, humans would understand their place in the universe. The orbital bombardment array began to charge. Energy gathered in the weapon systems of 300 ships. In moments, enough firepower to crack a continent would rain down on innocent people. Then everything went dark, every ship in the enforcement. Flotilla lost power at the same moment. Navigation systems failed. Weapons went offline. Engines stopped. Life support flickered and almost died before backup systems kicked in. 300 warships, the pride of the Galactic Sovereignty Council, drifted helplessly in the void like dead leaves on a pond. Fleet Commander Drossix roared in confusion. His crew scrambled to restore systems, but nothing worked. It was as if something had reached into every ship and simply turned it off. Ambassador. Kralith slammed his fists against his console. This was impossible. Their technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. No one could do this. No one had the capability, then they saw it. A small ship rose from Earth's surface. It was tiny compared to the Council vessels, barely large enough to hold a dozen beings. It flew straight toward the flagship and stopped directly in front of the main view screen. A transmission came through, and the Council saw their enemy for the first time. She was a human female, middle-aged, with dark hair turning gray at the temples and eyes that held no fear. She sat in a simple command chair, surrounded by screens showing data that the Council could not read. She introduced herself as Dr. Alina Vasquez, Director of Earth's United Defense Initiative. "You did not ask how we developed faster-than-light technology," she said. Her voice was calm, almost friendly. "You assumed we stumbled upon it by accident. You assumed we were like every other species you have conquered. Children playing with fire they did not understand." She smiled, and Ambassador Kralith felt his scales flush cold. "We did not discover faster-than-light travel last month. We discovered it 18 years ago." The council officers stared at each other in confusion. 18 years? But humanity had only revealed themselves to the galaxy recently. If they had possessed the technology for that long, why had they stayed hidden? Dr. Vasquez continued as if she could read their thoughts. "We spent 18 years watching you. We observed your ships. We studied your technology. We learned your tactics and your strategies. We mapped your territory and identified your weaknesses. We knew you would come eventually. We knew exactly how you would respond to our existence." Behind her, a large display activated. It showed a map of Earth, and scattered across every continent were thousands of glowing points. Each point represented a hidden installation, a defensive system that the Council had never detected. "Your sensors are good," Dr. Vasquez said. "Ours are better. Your weapons are powerful. Ours are more powerful. You thought you were coming to conquer a primitive species. Instead, you flew into a trap that we spent nearly 2 decades preparing." Fleet Commander Drossix found his voice. "You cannot defeat the Council. We have 10,000 worlds. We have fleets beyond counting. Even if you destroy us here, more will come. Millions more." Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. "Yes, we know. We have studied your military forces in great detail. We know exactly how many ships you have, where they are stationed, and how quickly they can respond. We also know something else." She leaned forward. "We know that your council has never faced a real enemy. You conquer species that have just discovered space travel. You attack civilizations that are centuries behind you. You are bullies, not warriors. You have forgotten what it means to fight someone who can fight back." The display behind her changed. Now it showed the Council fleet, each ship marked and labeled. Then new markers appeared, spreading across the image. Hundreds of them, thousands human ships, hidden in the asteroid belt behind the moon, scattered throughout the solar system. A fleet that had been waiting in silence for the Council to arrive. "Your ships will be released unharmed," Dr. Vasquez said. "Your crews will not be hurt. You will return to your council with a message." She stood up from her chair. "Earth is not a conquest. Earth is a neighbor. We are willing to discuss trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. We want to join the galactic community as equals, not as slaves. But understand this clearly." Her eyes hardened and her voice became cold. "If you ever threaten our world again, we will not simply defend ourselves. We will not hide behind our borders and hope you go away. If you come for us with war, we will follow you home. We will find every shipyard, every military base, every installation you have, and we will make sure you never threaten anyone again." The transmission ended. Slowly, impossibly, power returned to the Council ships. Systems came back online. Engines hummed to life. Weapons recharged, but no one fired. Fleet Commander Drossix looked at the small human ship still hovering before them. He looked at the planet below, bristling with hidden defenses. He looked at the markers on his screen showing the human fleet surrounding them. For the first time in his long and violent life, Drossix knew what it felt like to be prey. Ambassador Kralith gave the order to withdraw. The enforcement. Flotilla turned away from Earth and began the long journey back to Council space. Behind them, the blue planet continued to spin, peaceful and beautiful. And on that planet, 8 billion humans looked up at the sky and smiled. They had expected this day. They had prepared for it. And when the moment came, they had not flinched. The Council had claimed control. Earth had said no now. The universe would learn what that meant. The return of the enforcement flotilla caused the greatest crisis in Council history. When the 300 warships limped back to the Citadel of Consensus, defeated without firing a single shot, The elder races could not believe what they were hearing. High Arbiter Velthicon demanded a full invasion. He wanted every ship the Council possessed to descend upon Earth and reduce it to ash. He did not care about the cost. He did not care about the losses. The humans had embarrassed the Council, and that crime demanded the ultimate punishment. But for the first time in 11,000 years, the Council could not agree. The Morthkai were the greatest military strategists in the known universe. They had never lost a war. Their silicon minds could calculate the outcome of any battle with perfect accuracy. When they received the data about Earth's defenses, they ran 17,000 simulations of a war with humanity. Every simulation ended the same way, in the best scenarios. Both sides destroyed each other completely. In the worst scenarios, the Morthkai ceased to exist while humanity survived. There was no simulation where the Council achieved a clean victory. There was no path to conquest that did not lead to ruin. The Morthkai representatives stood before the Council and delivered their verdict. They would not commit their forces to this war. The mathematics did not support it. Fighting humanity was suicide. High Arbiter Velthicon shattered 3 pillars in his fury. But the Morthkai did not change their answer. The Salaneth Collective faced an even stranger problem. They were a hive mind species, billions of individuals connected into one vast consciousness. They always thought the same thoughts. They always reached the same conclusions. Unity was their greatest strength. But when they tried to analyze the human situation, something broke. Some nodes wanted to attack immediately. Other nodes wanted to flee. Some nodes argued for negotiation. Others suggested surrender. For the first time in their species' memory, the Salaneth could not agree with themselves. Their perfect unity fractured like glass, and the arguments that raged inside their collective mind threatened to tear them apart. Several clusters simply went silent, unable to process the paradox of a species that was both primitive and terrifying at the same time. The other elder races watched in horror. If the Morthkai would not fight and the Salaneth could not think, what hope did the rest of them have? Rumors began to spread through Council space. Stories about humanity leaked from the returning fleet and traveled faster than light. Traders and merchants passed the tales from station to station, planet to planet. By the time a month had passed, everyone in the galaxy knew what had happened at Earth. Some of the stories were true. Some were exaggerated. Some were completely invented. But all of them carried the same message. The Council was not invincible. On the planet Cathrosphore, a species called the Drethi had served the Council for 6,000 years. They were small, gentle beings with 4 arms and soft gray skin. They had been conquered when their civilization was still young, and they had known nothing but servitude ever since. They worked in the mines and factories of Kethros, producing resources that flowed to the elder races while they themselves remained poor and powerless. One day, a Drethi worker found something in the communication system. Someone had planted a human transmission in a place where the Council sensors could not find it. It was a recording, a simple reading of a document that humans called the Declaration of Independence. The worker listened to words about freedom and equality, about the right of people to choose their own destiny. He heard ideas that his species had never been allowed to think. He copied the transmission and shared it with others. Within 3 planetary cycles, every Drethi on Kethosphore had heard the message. Within 10 cycles, they organized the first resistance movement in their history. They did not attack their masters directly. They were not ready for that. But they began to talk, to plan, to dream of something different. And they were not alone. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 labor camps and servant quarters, the story of Earth spread like fire. Species that had served the Council for millennia began to ask questions they had never asked before. Why did they obey? What would happen if they refused? The Council faced a nightmare that none of them had imagined. Humanity had not just defied them. Humanity had become a symbol, a proof that resistance was possible. High Arbiter Velthicon gathered his remaining allies and made a desperate decision. If they could not destroy humanity with force, they would destroy them with silence. He invoked an ancient law called the Silence Protocol. All records of Earth would be erased. All mentions of humans would be deleted from every database. Every transmission would be blocked. Every traitor who spoke of them would be punished. The Council would pretend that Earth did not exist. They hoped that, without attention, without contact, humanity would simply fade away and be forgotten. It was a foolish plan born of fear and frustration. The Council did not understand something fundamental about humanity. They did not understand that humans had spent 18 years watching everything the Council did. They had placed sensors and spies throughout Council space. They had learned to read every communication frequency and crack every code. When the silence protocol began, humanity knew about it within hours. Dr. Elena Vasquez received the report in her office on Earth. She read about the Council's plan to erase humanity from history, to pretend they had never existed. She read about the crackdowns on species who spoke of Earth, the punishment of traitors who carried human goods. She also read the reports from Kethros 4 and 100 other worlds. She saw the resistance movements growing, the questions being asked, the cracks forming in the Council's control. She called a meeting of Earth's leadership and presented them with a choice. They could stay hidden behind their defenses and let the Council pretend they did not exist. They could protect themselves and ignore what was happening to the rest of the galaxy. Or they could fight back, not with weapons, not with ships and soldiers. They could fight with something far more dangerous. They could fight with the truth. The vote was unanimous. Earth would not hide. Earth would not be erased. And Earth would not abandon the species, who were already beginning to hope. Dr. Vasquez looked at the reports from across the galaxy, at the resistance movements and the fractured alliances and the growing chaos. She thought about the slaves on Kethros 4, listening to the Declaration of Independence. Then she began to plan. The Council wanted silence. Humanity would give them thunder. The transmissions began on a quiet night in Council space. They appeared everywhere at once, on every planet, every station, every ship. They bypassed firewalls and security systems as if they did not exist. They slipped through sensors and blockers without leaving a trace. One moment the communication networks were normal. The next moment, humanity was speaking to the galaxy. The first messages were simple. Greetings in local languages, offers of friendship, basic information about Earth and its people. The transmissions were warm and welcoming, designed to make contact rather than create fear. The Council scrambled to block them, but nothing worked. Human technology was too advanced, too subtle, too deeply embedded in systems that the elder races had thought were secure. For every transmission they stopped, 10 more appeared. Then came the second wave. Humanity released everything they had learned during their 18 years of watching. They opened files that showed what the Council really was. They revealed secrets that the elder races had kept hidden for thousands of years. The galaxy learned about the Kareth, species that had been exterminated 3,000 years ago for refusing to pay tribute. The Council had told everyone that the Kareth died from a plague. The truth was that Council ships had sterilized their world from orbit, killing 4 billion innocent beings because they would not kneel. The galaxy learned about the Villani, a peaceful species of artists and musicians who had been enslaved to produce luxury goods for the elder races. When the Villani tried to preserve their culture, the Council destroyed their libraries, their instruments, their art. They erased everything that made the Villani unique and turned them into nothing but workers. The galaxy learned about experiments conducted on primitive species, about resources stripped from dying worlds, about lies told to keep conquered peoples obedient. Every atrocity the Council had ever committed was exposed in perfect detail. The transmissions also carried something else. Technical information, scientific data. The secrets of faster-than-light travel, of shield technology, of weapons systems. Everything a subjugated species would need to defend itself against the Council. Humanity gave it away for free. On Kethros, the Drethi resistance received files that showed them how to build communication jammers. Within weeks, they could speak to each other without the Council hearing. On a dozen other worlds, oppressed species learned how to construct basic defensive shields. How to hide from council censors? How to organize without being detected? The elder races watched their empire begin to crumble. 3 client species declared independence in a single day. They did not have the power to defeat the council in open war, but they no longer had to. They could hide, they could resist. They could make occupation too costly to maintain. The Salanoth Collective suffered a complete breakdown. Nearly a third of their nodes rejected the main consciousness and formed a new entity that called itself the Salanoth Liberation. For the first time in their history, Salanoth were at war with themselves. The Morthkai made their calculations and reached a clear conclusion. The old order was mathematically doomed. They withdrew from council affairs entirely, taking their fleets and their worlds and their knowledge with them. They would wait and watch to see what emerged from the chaos. High Arbiter Velthicon stood in the great chamber of the Citadel of Consensus and looked at the ruins of everything he had built. His allies were gone or wavering. His client species were rebelling. His secrets were exposed for all the galaxy to see. He had one option left. He gathered every ship that remained loyal to the Council. 10,000 warships answered his call, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. It was enough firepower to destroy 1,000 worlds. It was the full might of the Elder Races, united for one final purpose. They would go to Earth. They would destroy humanity. They would burn that small blue planet until nothing remained but ash and memory. And then they would rebuild their empire on the ashes. The fleet departed for the Sol System. It took them 3 days to cross the vast distance between Council space and Earth. During that journey, High Arbiter Velthicon imagined his victory. He imagined human cities burning, human ships exploding, human voices falling silent forever. He imagined peace returning to his galaxy. The fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol System and prepared for battle. Sensors scanned the space ahead, looking for the human defenders who would try to stop them. What they found made them stop. Earth was not alone. Ships filled the space around the human homeworld. But they were not all human ships. There were Drethi vessels, small but numerous, their crews fighting for the first time in 6,000 years. There were Villani ships, painted with the colors and patterns of their lost art, a culture reborn in rebellion. There were Selenoth liberation ships, fragments of a broken hive mind now fighting against their former selves. There were ships from dozens of species. From worlds scattered across the galaxy, some were primitive, barely capable of space travel. Others were advanced with technology that rivaled the Elder Races. All of them had come to Earth. All of them had answered humanity's call. The combined fleet outnumbered the Council forces 3-1. Dr. Alina Vasquez transmitted a message to High Arbiter Velthicon from her command ship. She looked older now, grayer, but her eyes still held the same calm determination that had faced down the enforcement flotilla years ago. "We told you we could follow you home," she said. "We chose not to. We do not want your territory. We do not want your resources. We do not want your submission. We only want you to understand something that you seem to have forgotten in 11,000 years of rule." She paused, and behind her, the view screen showed the combined fleet in all its strange and beautiful variety. The universe is vast enough for everyone to be free. High Arbiter Velthicon looked at the forces arrayed against him. He looked at the species who had once been his slaves, now standing as warriors. He looked at the humans who had refused to kneel and had taught others to do the same. He gave the order to attack. It was the last order he would ever give as High Arbiter of the Galactic Sovereignty Council. The battle for the future of the galaxy had begun. The Battle of Sol lasted 11 minutes. It was not the long, grinding war that High Arbiter Velthicon had imagined. It was not the glorious victory he had promised his followers. It was a swift and surgical defeat. Precise and devastating, human ships moved through the Council fleet like dancers, their technology generations ahead of anything the Elder Races possessed. They targeted weapons, systems, and engines, disabling ships without destroying them. Behind them came the allied vessels, the Drethi and the Villani and all the others. Coordinating with a precision that showed months of secret training, the Council commanders tried to respond. But their orders arrived too slow, and their weapons fired too late. Every tactic they attempted had already been predicted. Every formation they tried had already been countered. Humanity had spent 18 years studying the Council's military doctrine, and now that knowledge was being used against them. One by one, the Council warships went dark. Their weapons were destroyed. Their engines were crippled. But their life support remained active. Their crews remained alive. When the shooting stopped, 10,000 ships drifted helplessly in space, their occupants waiting for death that would not come. Dr. Elena Vasquez transmitted a message to the defeated fleet. Her voice was tired but warm. Our ships will be towed to safe locations. Your crews will be given food, water, and medical care. When this is over, you will be free to return home. We are not your enemies. We never wanted to be your enemies. But we could not let you continue to enslave the galaxy. High Arbiter Velthicon listened to her words from his disabled flagship. His crystal body had cracked during the battle, and dark lines ran through his form like old wounds. He had ruled the Council for 300 years. He had commanded the greatest military force in the known universe, and he had been defeated in 11 minutes. He expected execution. He expected punishment. He expected the humans to do to him what the Council had done to so many others. Instead, they sent a shuttle. When the shuttle landed on Earth, Velthicon found himself in a strange place. It was an old building, preserved from an earlier age of human history. The humans called it the United Nations, and they explained that it was where their species had once gathered to argue and negotiate, and try to cooperate despite their differences. Dr. Vasquez walked beside him through halls lined with flags. Each flag represented a different nation, a different government, a different group of humans who had once been enemies. Wars had been fought under those flags. Terrible things had been done in their names, but the humans had learned to live together anyway. See this as weakness? Dr. Vasquez said as they walked. You think we should destroy you while we have the power? You believe that mercy is foolish, and that only strength matters. Velthicon did not respond. But his silence was answer enough. Your council ruled through fear for 11,000 years, she continued. You made everyone afraid of you, and you thought that made you strong. But fear does not create loyalty. Fear does not create progress. Fear does not create anything that lasts. The moment you faced something you could not frighten, your entire system fell apart. She led him into the assembly chamber, where representatives of Earth and dozens of alien species had already gathered. The Drethi were there, their four-armed forms hunched over data screens as they planned the reconstruction of their world. The Villani were there, singing softly in harmonies that brought tears to human eyes. Even fragments of the Salinath Liberation were there, learning to think as individuals for the first time. We are not going to rule the galaxy, Dr. Vasquez said. We are not going to replace the Council with a human empire. That would just create another system of fear, another structure built on force. We want something different. She gestured to the assembly. We call it the Galactic Cooperative. A voluntary alliance of species who choose to work together. No masters and no slaves. No conquerors and no conquered. Just neighbors, trying to help each other survive and grow. Velthicon watched the assembly work. He saw species that had been enemies for centuries now, sitting side by side. He saw former slaves offering advice to former masters. He saw something he had never imagined possible. He saw hope in the years that followed. The Galactic Sovereignty Council dissolved. Not through war or conquest, but through irrelevance. Species that had been client states for millennia discovered they no longer needed masters. The elder races found themselves forced to interact with the galaxy as equals rather than rulers. Some of them could not adjust. The Verax retreated to their homeworlds and closed their borders, unable to accept a universe where they were not dominant. Several other elder races did the same, choosing isolation over equality. But others changed. The Morthkai returned from their self-imposed exile and offered their strategic expertise to the cooperative. Their calculations now served peace instead of war, helping to resolve conflicts before they could become crises. The Selenoth, Both the original collective and the liberation began a slow process of reconciliation, learning to exist as separate but connected entities. The Galactic Cooperative was not perfect. It was messy and complicated, full of disagreements and compromises and frustrating negotiations. Different species wanted different things, and finding common ground was often difficult, but it was alive in a way the Council had never been. 50 years after the Battle of Sol, a young crystalline being stood before the Cooperative Assembly. He was the grandson of High Arbiter Velthicon, and he had just become the first member of his species to complete the Universal Ambassador program that humans had designed. He looked out at the assembly, at humans and Drethi and Vellani, and dozens of other species, all working together toward a future that his grandfather could never have imagined. "Humanity taught us something that my people had forgotten," he said. "They taught us that strength is not measured by what you can destroy. Strength is measured by what you can build and what you are willing to protect." His crystal body shifted colors, displaying a new hue that no one had ever seen before. It was a color of gratitude, of hope, of new beginnings. When the Council claimed control, they expected Earth to kneel. Instead, Earth offered an open hand. Some of us were wise enough to take it. In the assembly, old enemies sat beside new friends. Former masters learned from former slaves. A galaxy that had known nothing but fear and submission was slowly, painfully, beautifully learning what it meant to be free. Outside the windows of the assembly hall, ships from 100 worlds passed peacefully through Earth's sky. They carried traders and diplomats, scientists and artists, families traveling to visit friends on distant planets. The stars that had once been divided by borders of fear now connected a community of choice. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better than what had come before. And somewhere in that vast and hopeful galaxy, an old crystalline being spent his final days in a garden on Earth. High Arbiter Velthicon, former ruler of the greatest empire the universe had ever known, had found peace in watching human children play among alien flowers. He had learned something that his 11,000 years of rule had never taught him. He had learned that building was harder than destroying, but infinitely more worthwhile. And he had learned that the small, soft, fragile beings of Earth had been right all along. The universe was vast enough for everyone to be free.